When Vitalis returned, he told me to get my harp ready and all the things we required for the entertainment. Pretty Heart, who knew what this meant, turned to his master and commenced his entreaties again. He could not have better expressed his desires than by the sounds he uttered, the twisting of his face, and the turns of his body. There were real tears on his cheeks and they were real kisses that he imprinted on Vitalis' hand. "You want to play?" asked Vitalis, who had not been told what happened before. "Yes, oh, yes." Pretty Heart's whole person seemed to cry out. He tried to jump to show that he was no longer sick. We know very well that if we took him out it would be his death. It was time for us to start. Before going, I made up a good fire and wrapped Pretty Heart up in his coverlets. He cried again and embraced me as much as he could, then we started. As we tramped through the snow, my master told me what he expected of me. We could not, of course, give our usual repertoire, as our principal actors were missing, but Capi and I could vie with each other in doing our best. We had to collect 40 francs. 40 francs! It was terrible. Impossible. Vitalis had prepared everything. All we had to do now was to light the candles, but this was an extravagance that we could not indulge in until the room was filled, for our illuminations would not have to come to an end before our entertainment. Whilst we took possession of our theater, the town crier, with his drum, came through the village streets for the last time. After I had dressed Capi and myself, I went outside and stood behind a pillar to watch the people arrive. The roll of the drum became louder. It was approaching the marketplace and I could hear a babble of voices. Behind the drum came a score of youngsters, all keeping step. Without stopping the beating of his drum, the town crier took up his place between the two large lamps that were lit at the entrance of our theater. The public had only to walk in and take their seats for the performance to commence. Alas! How long they were coming, and yet the drum at the door continued gaily its rat-ta-ta-ta. All the boys in the village must have been there. But it was not the youngsters who were likely to give us 40 francs. There would have to be some important people, open-handed and generous. At last Vitalis decided that we ought to commence, although the hall was far from being full, but we could not wait longer, worried as we were by the terrible question of candles. I had to appear first and sing a few songs, accompanying myself on the harp. I must confess the applause that I received was very weak. I had never thought very much of myself as an entertainer, but the marked coolness with which the audience received my efforts discouraged me. If I did not please them they would certainly not give us anything. It was not for the glory that I was singing, it was for poor Pretty Heart. Ah, how I wanted to stir this public, to make them enthusiastic. But I could see only too well that they did not consider me a marvel. Capi was more successful. He received several encores. Thanks to Capi, the entertainment ended in a burst of applause. Not only did they clap their hands, but they stamped their feet. The decisive moment had arrived. While Capi, with the cup in his jaws, ran through the audience, I danced a Spanish dance on the stage, with Vitalis playing an accompaniment. Would Capi collect 40 francs? That was the question which made my heart beat while I smiled at the public in my pleasantest manner. I was out of breath, but I still continued to dance, for I was not to stop until Capi had returned. He did not hurry himself. When he found that he did not receive a coin, he placed his paw against the person's pocket. At last I saw him about to return, and thought that I might stop, but Vitalis made me a sign to go on. I continued to dance, and going a few steps nearer Capi, I saw that the cup was not full, far from it. Vitalis had also seen this. Bowing to the audience, he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I think that, without flattering ourselves, we have conscientiously carried out our program. Yet as our candles are still burning, I will, if the public wishes, sing some songs myself. Our dog, Capi, will make another quest and those who have not yet given will perhaps give this time. Please have your money ready." Although Vitalis had been my teacher, I had never really heard him sing, or at least not as he sung that evening. He selected 2 songs, an air from Joseph and one from Richard the Lion-Hearted. Although I was only a little boy and was no judge as to whether one sang with technique or without, Vitalis' singing stirred me strangely. I went into a corner of the stage, for my eyes filled with tears as I listened to his beautiful notes. Through a mist, I saw a young lady, who occupied the first row, clap her hands with all her might. I had already noticed that she was not a peasant like the rest of the people in the hall. She was a lady, young and beautiful, and from her handsome fur coat I took her to be the richest woman in the village. She had with her a little child who had applauded Capi heartily. It was probably her son, for the likeness was striking. After the first song, Capi went the round again. I saw with surprise that the lady had not put anything into his cup. When my master had finished the air from the second opera, she beckoned me to her. "I want to speak to that gentleman," she said. I was surprised. I thought she would have done better to have dropped something into the cup. Capi returned. He had collected very little more on the second round. "What does the lady want?" asked Vitalis. "To speak to you." "I have nothing to say." She did not give anything to Capi. Perhaps she would like to give it now. "Then it is for Capi to go to her, not for me." However, he decided to go, and took the dog with him. I followed them. But now a servant had appeared, carrying a lantern and a rug. He stood beside the lady and the child. Vitalis bowed coldly to her. "Forgive me for having disturbed you," she said, "but I wanted to congratulate you." Vitalis bowed, without saying a word. "I am a musician," continued the lady. "I am telling you this so that you will know how much I appreciate your superb talent." Superb talent. My master. The dog trainer. I was amazed. "An old man like me has no talent," he replied coldly. "Do not think that I am inquisitive, but," began the lady. "I am quite willing to satisfy your curiosity, madam," he said. "You are surprised that a dog trainer is able to sing a little. But I have not always been what I am now. When I was younger I was the servant of a great singer, and like a parrot I imitated him. I began to repeat some of the songs he practiced in my presence. That is all." The lady did not reply. She looked hard at Vitalis. He seemed embarrassed. "Goodbye, sir," she said at last, laying a stress on the word sir. "Goodbye, and once more let me thank you for the exquisite delight you have given me this evening." And leaning towards Capi she dropped the gold piece in his cup. I thought that Vitalis would escort her to the door, but he did nothing of the kind, and when she was out of hearing I heard him swear softly in Italian. "She gave Capi a louis," I said. I thought he was going to give me a blow, but he let his raised hand fall to his side. "A louis," he said, as though he were coming out of a dream. "Ah, yes, poor pretty heart. I had forgotten him. Let us go back to the little creature at once." I climbed the stairs of the inn first and went into the room. The fire was not out, but there were no flames. I lit a candle quickly. I was surprised not to hear any sound from Pretty Heart. I found him, lying under his coverlets, stretched out his full length, dressed in his general's uniform. He appeared to be asleep. I leaned over him and took his hand gently to wake him up. His hand was cold. Vitalis came into the room. I turned to him. "Pretty Heart is cold," I said. My master came to my side and also leaned over the bed. "He is dead," he said. It was to be. "Ah, Remi, boy, I did wrong to take you away from Mrs. Milligan. I am punished. Zerbino, Dulcie, and now Pretty Heart, and this is not the end." Chapter 15. Faithful Friends. We were still a long way from Paris. We had to go by roads covered with snow, and walk from morning till night, the north wind blowing in our faces. How sad and weary were those long tramps. Vitalis walked ahead, I at his heels, and Capi behind me. Thus in line we went onward without exchanging a word, for hours and hours, faces blue with cold, feet wet, stomachs empty. The people who passed us on the way turned round to gaze at us. Evidently they thought it strange. Where was this old man leading his child and the dog? The silence seemed terrible to me, and so sad. I would like to have talked just for company, but when I did venture to make a remark, Vitalis replied briefly, without even turning his head. Fortunately, Capi was more sociable, and as I trudged along I often felt his warm tongue on my hand. He licked me as much as to say, "Your friend, Capi, is here with you." Then I stroked him gently, without stopping. We understood each other, we loved each other. On the slippery snow we went straight ahead, without stopping, sleeping at night in a stable or in a sheepfold, with a piece of bread, alas, very small, for our meal in the evening. This was our dinner and supper in one. We did not tell the shepherds that we were dying of hunger, but Vitalis, with his usual cleverness, would say insinuatingly that the little chap was very fond of sheep's milk, because, when he was a baby, he used to drink it. This story did not always take effect, but it was a good night for me when it did. Yes, I was very fond of sheep's milk, and when they gave me some I felt much stronger the next day. It seemed strange to me that, as we neared Paris, the country ceased to be beautiful. The snow was not white and dazzling now. I had heard what a wonderful place Paris was, and I expected something extraordinary. I did not know exactly what. I should not have been surprised to see trees of gold, streets of marble, palaces everywhere. What were we poor things going to do when we reached Paris? I wanted to question Vitalis, but I did not dare, he seemed so gloomy. When we were in sight of the roofs and the church towers of the capital, he slackened his step to walk beside me. "Remi," he said suddenly, "we are going to part when we get to Paris." I looked at him. He looked at me. The sudden pallor of my face and the trembling of my lips told him what effect his words had on me. For a moment I could not speak. "Going to part," I murmured at last. "Poor little chap, yes, we must part." The tone in which he said this brought the tears to my eyes. It was so long since I had heard a kind word. "Oh, you are so good," I cried. "It is you who are good. You brave little heart." There comes a time in one's life when one feels these things. When all goes well, one goes along through life without thinking much who is with one, but when things go wrong, when one is on the wrong track, and above all when one is old, one wants to lean on somebody. You may be surprised that I have wanted to lean on you. And yet it is so. But only to see that your eyes are moist as you listen to me, comforts me, little Remi. I am very unhappy. I did not know what to say. I just stroked his hand. And the misfortune is that we have to part just at the time when we are getting nearer to each other. "But you're not going to leave me all alone in Paris?" I asked timidly. "No, certainly not. What would you do in the big city, all by yourself, poor child? I have no right to leave you, remember that. The day when I would not let that good lady take you and bring you up as her son, that day I bound myself to do the best I could for you. I can do nothing at this moment, and that is why I think it is best to part. It is only for a time. We can do better if we separate during the last months of the bad season. What can we do in Paris with all gone but Capi?" Hearing his name mentioned, dear Capi came beside us. He put his paw to his ear in military salute, then placed it on his heart, as though to tell us that we could count on his devotion. My master stopped to pass his hand affectionately over the dog's head. "Yes, Capi, you're a good, faithful friend, but, alas, without the others we can't do much now. But my harp. If I had 2 children like you it would be better. But an old man with just one little boy is bad business. I am not old enough. Now, if I were only blind or broken down. I am not in a pitiful state enough for people to stop and notice us. So, my boy, I have decided to give you to a padrone, until the end of the winter. He will take you with other children that he has, and you will play your harp." "And you?" I asked. "I am known in Paris, I have stayed there several times. I will give violin lessons to the Italian children who play on the streets. I have only to say that I will give lessons to find all the pupils I want. And, in the meantime, I will train 2 dogs that will replace poor Zerbino and Dulcie. Then in the spring we will be together again, my little Remi. We are only passing through a bad time now. Later, I will take you through Germany and England, then you will grow big and your mind will develop. I will teach you a lot of things and make a man of you. I promised this to Mrs. Milligan. I will keep my promise. That is the reason why I have already commenced to teach you English. You can speak French and Italian, that is something for a child of your age." Perhaps it was all for the best as my master said, but I could only think of 2 things. We were to be parted, and I was to have a padrone. During our wanderings I had met several padrones who used to beat the children who worked for them. They were very cruel, and they swore, and usually they were drunk. Would I belong to one of those terrible men? And then, even if fate gave me a kind master, it was another change. First, my foster mother, then Vitalis, then another. Was it to be always so? Should I never find anyone that I could love and stay with always? Little by little I had grown attached to Vitalis. He seemed almost what I thought a father would be. Should I never have a father, have a family? Always alone in this great world. Nobody's boy. Vitalis had asked me to be brave. I did not wish to add to his sorrows, but it was hard, so hard, to leave him. As we walked down a dirty street, with heaps of snow on either side covered with cinders and rotten vegetables, I asked, "Where are we?" "In Paris, my boy." Where were my marble houses? And the trees of gold, and the finely dressed people? Was this Paris? Was I to spend the winter in a place like this, parted from Vitalis and Capi?